Hello there guys. In this video I'll be building the Tamiya P-38J Lightning in 1/48 scale. This is a 2022 release from Tamiya based on their original 2019 P-38 kit. As you can perhaps see from comparing the box art, the P-38J had a number of differences, the most obvious of which is those radiators on the chin of the engines. All of the schemes in this kit are for natural metal finish P-38s, although looking at reference photos there do seem to be some J variants that were still originally painted in the olive drab and neutral grey. And of course the P-38 served in both the European theatre and the Pacific theatre of operations. Being a recent Tamiya release, this really is a premium quality kit. Everything from the quality of the box art and the box itself, the instructions and the other background material that you get in the box, and of course the engineering, are all really top notch. The cockpit of course is no exception to that, and you can see as I'm building it up here, just dry fitting everything. It slots together really well, and a superb amount of detail there. I really like the design where this cockpit builds up as a box and then sits inside the fuselage. We do get a seated pilot figure, but I decided to leave him out because I wanted the cockpit to be more visible. I followed Tamiya's mix for the interior green, which is a combination of XF3 and XF5, yellow and green. As always, all of my detail painting was done with Vallejo model colour acrylic paints. And then finally we have a decal that goes over the instrument panel to bring things alive there. Then we can start work on the main fuselage. This is a T-shaped piece which includes the cockpit floor and then the main spar for the wings. We have one moulded piece for the underside of the nose and the inner of the wings, which that T-piece fits into quite nicely. And then almost the entire upper wing is a single piece which lays on top of that. At this point we also have to make a decision about which version we're building because there are subtle differences in the nose gun arrangements. The cockpit slips nicely into that single upper wing piece, and then the lower piece attaches with a perfect fit. You can see there that Tamiya have given us a steel ball bearing for some nose weight. We also get two more of those for the engines. And I've put a bit of black pre-shading there on the area where the exhaust will go. The two booms for the engines come next. They are of course handed, so you need to make sure you get the right one and keep them separate during construction. Each main piece has that moulded in ring there to take that steel weight. The engineering here is really nice. The internal structure builds together as you would expect, but then the panels are separate parts that go on top and enable Tamiya to put the panel lines exactly where they would be on the real aircraft, without compromising any of the integrity of the structure. There's a good example there on the nose where we have the join of the pieces going down the centre, which is obviously not accurate, but then we have that panel going on top to cover those up. The booms just click nicely into place. On most kits I would say put that tailplane in place at the same time so that everything lines up properly, but there's absolutely zero wiggle room here, it just slots in perfectly. We do get the option of either the 150 or 300 gallon drop tanks. I actually decided to leave those off. I prefer the look of the aircraft without the drop tanks on. And at this stage the build of the aircraft is pretty much complete. We've just got a few details, the rudders, the propellers and the spinners, and a couple of engine panels, and we are done. We do get a masking set for the glazing, which is incredibly helpful. And when painting that glazing, I painted it all from the outside, but I put down a base layer of the interior green first, so that can be seen from the inside. And then I would put the top coat on top of that. As I say, all the paint schemes are natural metal finishes. We have Marge, we have Put Maru, and we have Pudgy 3, all from the Pacific Theatre in 1944. The main differences are of course the nose art and some variations in the spinner colours. I went for option A, which is Marge. I wanted to try something different here for my paint compared to my natural metal finish P17. Not because there's anything wrong with that, but just because I wanted to experiment. I've always had success in the past with Tamiya spray paints, so I went with their AS12 Bare Metal Silver. And I wasn't super happy with the result, to be honest. The colour is nice, but the paint itself hasn't gone down very well. I did try to be very consistent with my application, but you can see that I've got some strange variation in the surface here. Some of it looking quite grainy, almost like it's dried before it's hit the surface. And other parts on the wing, I don't know if you can see it there. I think that might be sink marks actually in the plastic showing through. A metal finish of course is always going to show up any flaws in your base. Strangely I have almost exactly the same mark on the other wing there. So I'm wondering if that isn't some kind of subtle sink mark. Anyway, I thought I could work with it, so I decided to mask off the red areas and paint those in Tamiya XF7, and the anti-glare panels, which if I remember correctly I painted in AK Real Colours Olive Drab. And that's not looking too bad, I think. I did of course want to put some variation on the panels, so I masked off a few of those and went over them with either Tamiya XF16, which is aluminium, or a variety of my Vallejo metal colours. And I think you can see on the wing there a good example of how that Vallejo panel is so much smoother than the Tamiya spray paint I used. At this stage I fitted the undercarriage, partly because I thought it was nice and sturdy, and partly because I didn't want to damage the paintwork by putting the model directly onto the cutting mat. This kit features a lot of decals, a huge amount of stencils, so it took me about sort of 4 or 5 evenings to go through these, adding them slowly. The good news is they're generally symmetrical, so you can build it up quite quickly by doing 2 at a time. Whether it's an F1 car or an aircraft, I always find the decals bring the model to life. And there's Marge's photo. Now at this point I made a really dumb mistake. The metal finish is looking pretty decent there. I meant to put down a semi-gloss coat, and I very stupidly put the wrong varnish in my airbrush, and I put down a matte coat, which really dulled things down, as you would imagine. I did then go back over it after it had dried with a semi-gloss coat, but it's still not quite as shiny as I would hope. I know it shouldn't be really glowing gloss, but this is just a bit too matte for me. Having said that, I didn't want to go the other way and put down a gloss coat, because the VMS varnish is incredibly glossy and I think would go the wrong way. If you've seen my channel before, you might know that I like to keep my aircraft weathering to a minimum. However, a panel line wash is always useful. So I'm using this pre-mixed black panel line wash from Ammo. Normally I use oil paints, but I've had this for a while and I thought I would use it up. I think the black does a really good job of contrasting with the natural metal. And of course the semi-gloss varnish helps the wash to flow down the panel lines. You can see almost straight away the depth and the contrast that the panel line wash adds. As always, any excess is cleaned up with a brush very lightly dampened in odourless thinner. Sometimes I just clean up the excess, other times I drag it backwards in the direction of the airflow to give a kind of grimy, dirty effect. Finally, the superchargers and the exhausts look a little bit too glossy and clean, so I took some of these Humbrol pigments. Initially I started with the smoke colour, but it wasn't really dark enough, so I moved on to the black pigment, just adding a small amount of exhaust staining on the boom. Then, to add to the effect of the discoloration, I added a small amount of brown rust colour pigment, which hopefully looks a little bit like heat staining. And with that done, my P-38J was finished. So there we go guys, that was my build of Tamiya's P-38J in natural metal finish. As you would expect with a Tamiya kit, the build was fantastic, everything went together really well, and as a result of that it was actually quite a quick build overall. I particularly like the extras that Tamiya give us, such as the masks for the canopy, although you can see a little bit of overspray from the silver on some of my canopy clasps. This P-38 is the last of the aircraft that I have in progress at the moment. I've been on a bit of an aircraft run all through the summer, but I do have some armoured fighting vehicles, some AFVs, some tanks, etc. in the queue for some future builds. Of course, as always, I'd like to say thank you to you for watching, and thank you to my Patreon supporters and YouTube members for their ongoing support. They've already seen some work in progress previews of my next 2 or 3 builds. And hopefully I will see you again in those videos. Until then, thank you once again for watching, and have fun modelling.